Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as usual, let's go over the market, talk about what happened because we had quite a wild and I guess volatile technically day. It's like volatile, but not really because it only went one way. But the price range that Tesla moved today was quite ridiculous. So yeah, all that being said and done, guys, let's jump into it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. Again, nothing I say is financial advice. Do your own research, make your own decisions. But let's just jump right into it. Tesla ending the day up almost 2.5%, putting us just over $113, which isn't too shabby considering we essentially started the day off at $101.93 roughly. Very early on into the morning. Now, I am a little bit sad, and the reason I'm sad is because I slept in today. And what does that mean? Well, the price target I've been talking about for about a week now, how I'm like, oh, I'm gonna enter calls if Tesla goes to about 100. Well, it went to about 100 today, and I slept in. Missed it. It bounced off extremely quickly. And yeah, that's just sometimes how the cookie crumbles. That's, you know what? That's just what you get for sleeping in. You know what I'm saying? Because right here would have been, man, this would have been just phenomenal entry for calls because pretty much from the low of the day, not that I would have entered probably somewhere around like this level right here. Dude, I mean, assuming I held still, of course, 10% movement in one day. That's ridiculous. Anyways, so all that being said and done, guys, let's just talk about it. So essentially, I mean, you know, we talked about this yesterday. We said how there is a potential bear flag that was setting up, right? Which looked something like this, right? We did talk about this yesterday, right? How we had this bear flag potentially setting up and how I said that I see one of two paths happening. Either at number one, from here-ish, we bounce up and go straight to where my price target is right now, which is around that kind of 140 range, or we go down and then we go up. Right. Well, I think it's pretty obvious which path we decided to take. The bear flag did play out. I did say it's a small bear flag. Even if it plays out, it's not a huge deal. And, you know, it'll probably just take us down to about $100. That's essentially what happened. And we got an absolute glorious bounce from there. Right. Again, from the lowest point to where we closed was about about 11%. Well, let's see, because I didn't measure it from the bottom. I measured it from where I would have potentially entered. But we did get about 11% increase. From the bottom to just the close, not even to the highest point. To the highest point, it went from peak to trough of about 12.5%, which is quite surreal, actually. That's an absolutely insane recovery, which just further solidifies the fact that, yeah, we are potentially, you know, finding a beautiful consolidation and base around here, because you can see we're just constantly going lower. We're just constantly bouncing harder and harder, right? Overall, right? Another way you can look at it for, you know, a slightly more bullish perspective is, you know, before this situation kind of happened, you could have easily looked at it as something like this, where, you know, we were trading in this little bit of a range like this. Came down to the bottom of it and we finally broke out of it as well, right? That's another way you can potentially also sort of look at it, or you can just do like this as well. Doesn't really matter. The point is the fact that we were more or less in this kind of range and we did finally break out, which is a good sign. Now, this isn't, of course, all, you know, easy going from here. There are still important levels that we need to continue to, you know, break through and hold and whatnot. The SPY, I mean, the market itself was actually up. I mean, QQ was up 2.75%, which is quite a lot. So Tesla technically underperforming the market, but taking into account the price range that Tesla moved, I would say that, you know, for today, it's a little bit of an, you know, it's excusable to say the least, right? But, you know, the SPY did ended up breaking out finally from this little channel over here. So we did finally go up to the 390 level, which I did talk about yesterday, how we might gap fill around this 390 level, which we actually did. So that's interesting. You know, so we'll see where that overall takes us. But I personally wouldn't be surprised if after today, this morning, we had I think the jobs or unemployment numbers or both. I can't remember. It was one of those. But, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the SPY actually potentially rallies up to somewhere around 400. That really wouldn't shock me. And that could be the range that Tesla potentially uses to essentially have an excuse to finally move up to around that kind of 140 to 150 range, anywhere in that general vicinity, right? Which is kind of my overall, you know, price target, which from here will be about a give or take 30-ish% move. Now, that's obviously fantastic, right? Now, again, like I said, it's not all over just yet. It's not, you know, it's too early to get too excited just yet because, you know, we definitely still want to overall break this overall downtrend. And in my opinion, that you can still argue that the downtrend is actually still technically intact. And I would argue it looks something more like this personally, right? So what we really want to see for this potential like downward, I guess, movement to stop and to get at least somewhat of a mini reversal to again go up to that around 140, 150. Price target is going to be to break out of this little channel that we are potentially in, which would essentially mean that Tesla, let's say starting Monday, maybe Tuesday, would want to go ahead and break to make it easy and to make it just straightforward about 120. We want to start breaking about 120, and then of course right above 120 we also have that 123 to 124-ish range that we got rejected at several times over here. So essentially 120 to 125, extremely crucial and vital level. However, if we can break the 120 to 125 level and most importantly hold above it, right? So for instance, as an example, if we potentially go something like this, right, that could be something like, roughly is what the move could potentially look like. And that's what I would want to see, right? Just as a very rough example. Of course, it doesn't have to play out exactly like that, but that's just kind of the idea I'm personally looking for, more or less, right? So that's all looking pretty dandy, and I'm not too upset. I'm actually quite pleased with what happened today. Now, in case you're wondering why Tesla essentially fell off a cliff yet again, as if there's, how many more cliffs can there be? Mainly because Tesla did reduce their the prices on pretty much all their vehicles in Asia, China, etc. Japan, I believe. I think Korea, South Korea as well. Maybe another region too. I can't remember. But anyway, they pretty much reduced the prices in Asia more or less across the board, about 10%, right? Which, you can view it as a bullish, bearish thing. I personally view it as fairly neutral to slightly bullish because, again, you reduce prices, but if you do the math correctly, right, the amount of extra new markets and, categories, if you will, of income that you enter to now make your, product more available to them, because it is now within their price point, you can outweigh the loss in, potential, profits, margins, etc. Right? So if you outsell the negative, the downward pressure you put on the margins and the overall profit, that overall can outweigh it. And if you do the math correctly and you find the perfect price point, there's a term for it in business, I forgot what it's called, but then it can overall be a net positive. Anyway, that's just kind of the way I view it. But ultimately, I also view it in the sense of how the ultimate goal of Tesla is not necessarily to sell as many vehicles as possible at the absolute best profit imaginable or margins or whatever, right? Even though that is, of course, ideal if you can, as the cherry on the cake. The ultimate, I guess the game plan, if you will, of Tesla is to sell just as many vehicles as possible at a good enough profit as possible as well, without having to potentially be absolute min-maxing it, essentially. Though, of course, if you can, that's ideal. And the main reason for that is because at the end of the day, number one, the word of mouth gets stronger. More vehicles on the road, more vehicles equals better FSD dojo and all that stuff, right? Because the cars are literally seeing more things, so it's training and sending all this information that the cars are seeing while they're driving back to Tesla, which of course is training their AI module, including dojo in the hopefully near future, which of course in turn compounds the rate that FSD increases and gets better exponentially, which is great. And on top of that, the ultimate goal, I personally also believe, is Tesla's vehicles will be essentially SaaS, software as a service, essentially, more or less, where you can essentially be buying, maybe like an app store on Tesla. You can buy apps, you can buy, you can download apps, you can buy things there, kind of like your phone, essentially, right? The same kind of process. And there could be a lot more things, like, for instance, selling more FSD to customers, monthly FSD, and who knows what else they have in the pipelines. And that's the way I view it, where the vehicle will ultimately turn into a software type of business, on top of course, also being a hardware type business, being, the vehicle itself, the components itself. But anyway, that's just kind of how I view it fundamentally. So as a short term, it could be a little bit, mixed results, potentially, bearish, maybe slightly bullish, whatever. But long term, I think it's an absolute win, assuming, of course, it goes according to plan. But that's just more of a fundamental talk. In terms of going back to technicals, yeah, it's not looking bad at all, guys. So again, the main levels I will personally be looking at is essentially 120 to 125. That is the most crucial level I want to see break. And then I definitely think we can get up to that level of about the 140-ish range. Now, another thing to keep in mind, and one thing I personally like to do, is take a look at TSLQ, which is essentially just an inverse Tesla, if you will, right? So if Tesla goes up 2.4%, this is down 2.4%, and vice versa. And you can see we are essentially consolidating heavily around this area, just as much as Tesla is, of course, consolidating around this area down here. The idea is somewhat similar, but this is looking a lot more bearish, at least for the short term, because it's getting rejected several times, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and an absolute obscene rejection once again at this level that finally kind of forced it to almost crash from these levels, right? Which is a pretty bearish sign to see, which in turn, of course, is a bullish sign for Tesla. Now, where will this go potentially? And this is where things get interesting. Check it out. So if this thing comes down to where I personally think it will, which is going to be essentially down to where the previous rough, old resistance to potentially now new support will be, which should be around this general level, right around this kind of 60 to around 64-ish level, right around this overall level. So we'll put two lines right here, right? But somewhere within this general vicinity is where I personally wouldn't be surprised for it to come down, which, come down here, probably consolidate consolidate, and then most likely potentially bounce, which of course will be bad for Tesla itself. However, that is essentially what I would not be surprised to see, right? So we'll see where that takes us. But the interesting thing here, check it out, right? If we do go from here, and let's say we do come down to this general level, right around this kind of, between 64 to 61-ish level. So let's say we go down to like 61 and a half, for instance, as an example. That's almost a 30% move from here. Okay, well, let's see. What if Tesla goes to my rough, 140 projection or target, if you will? What percent move is that? Well, as you can see, it is about the same move, right? So that kind of just really solidifies that, Tesla can finally get a bounce, a much needed bounce, because this is just getting ridiculous. Most likely test the upper line of this overall yellow trend, downtrend that we are in, which again, around the 140 to 150 level, which in turn also means that this thing will come down to retest the old resistance, now new support level, right around this kind of, 64 to 60-ish level, somewhere in that general range, which would make sense. They move about the same percent in that scenario as well. It lines up for both of them to retest potential supports or resistances, if you will, that are important on breakouts or breakdowns. And that would make just a lot of sense to me. And this is also forming a bearish divergence, while Tesla is actually forming a bullish divergence. So the things are just laid out, guys. This doesn't mean that it's just going to go straight up there. It could, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean it's just going to go straight up there, and it'll just be that simple. The market will always find a way to make it essentially the most obnoxious way possible to finally get to these levels and to make it as confusing as possible to as many people as possible, because that is just what the market does, right? It does that, and it wins quite heavily. So you can see Tesla here making a new little high, kind of peeking its head above the other levels here, even though it is actually not even higher than these levels. And if not, it's about the same level as this one here, though slightly lower on the chart, slightly higher on the RSI. And of course, substantially, well, not substantially lower on the RSI, slightly higher than this level over here that we closed at, which was around 123. But the chart, of course, is substantially lower. So yeah, it just kind of all makes sense, guys. It really all makes sense. I'm still feeling fantastic. I am a little sad I missed my entry on the calls around that 101 level that I've been waiting for like a week now, and I slept in. That's amazing. And sometimes, sometimes it'd be like that. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing, guys. I think we're setting up for a beautiful bounce here. Again, could be completely wrong, not financial advice. That is just what I'm currently seeing. Again, if you're a bear, pretty much the only thing you'd want to be seeing from here is somehow Tesla to crash even further and break below 100. However, if we're above 100, I do believe that we are setting up and consolidating here, getting the spring loaded and ready to bounce to about that 140 to 150 level. And yeah, that's what I'm seeing, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great weekend. Let me know what you think down below. See you tomorrow, or not tomorrow. I'll see you Monday. Peace.